Security alarms shrieked through the Pentagon's corridors, their piercing wails echoing off marble walls like the death cry of America's most sacred secrets. Major Elena Rodriguez walked between two armed guards, her wrists bound by military-grade restraints that seemed almost theatrical against her small frame. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a messy high bun, loose curls framing a face that belonged more in a fashion magazine than a war crimes tribunal. The fitted gray t-shirt and dark military pants she wore contrasted sharply with the formal dress uniform surrounding her. 15 pairs of eyes tracked her movement as she entered the Pentagon's most secure briefing room. These weren't ordinary observers. They were the apex predators of America's military hierarchy. Admirals whose decisions had shaped global conflicts. Generals whose names appeared in classified history books. Each face bore the weathered marks of decades spent making life-and-death choices in the shadows. Admiral Marcus Stone sat at the center of the curved table, his massive frame filling the leather chair like a monument to military authority. His shaved head gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, and the forest green military t-shirt stretched across his barrel chest displayed decades of combat ribbons. At 58, he commanded respect through sheer presence, the kind of man who had never been told no by anyone wearing fewer stars than him. "Major Rodriguez," his voice boomed across the chamber, each word carefully measured to demonstrate absolute control. "You stand accused of the most heinous crime possible for someone wearing our nation's uniform: treason." The massive screens behind him displayed classified documents in stark red letters. Security breach, level 1, alert, 12 operatives missing. Below that, timestamps showing computer access logs from Elena's personal terminal at 2:37 a.m., precisely when a convoy of American special operators had been ambushed in the Syrian desert. Elena stood perfectly straight, despite the restraints, her green eyes never wavering from Stone's gaze. There was something unsettling about her composure, not the resignation of guilt or the panic of innocence, but the stillness of someone calculating variables in an equation no one else could see. "Your computer accessed our most sensitive operational files at exactly the moment our people walked into what can only be described as a carefully orchestrated trap," Stone continued, rising from his chair to tower over the room. 12 of America's finest warriors are missing, presumed dead, because someone in this building sold them out. Colonel Sarah Mitchell leaned forward from her position to Stone's right. At 45, she was the Pentagon's leading cybersecurity expert, her sharp features reflecting years of hunting digital ghosts through classified networks. "The access logs are irrefutable, Major. Your terminal, your security credentials, your biometric confirmation, the evidence could not be more clear." General Harrison Webb, the tribunal's presiding officer, consulted his tablet with the methodical precision of a man who had spent 35 years weighing evidence in military courts. His gray mustache twitched slightly as he reviewed the charges. "Major Rodriguez, how do you respond to these allegations?" Elena's voice carried a slight accent that added unexpected elegance to her words. "I maintain my innocence, sir. I was not at my terminal at the time indicated in those logs." Stone's laugh was harsh and cutting. "Of course you were. The biometric scanners don't lie, Major. Your fingerprints, your retinal scan, your voice pattern, all confirmed. Unless you are suggesting our most advanced security systems have somehow been compromised by forces unknown." "Actually, Admiral," Elena said quietly, "that's exactly what I'm suggesting." The room erupted in murmurs. Captain Miguel Torres, Stone's aide-de-camp, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. At 32, he had followed Stone's career trajectory with absolute loyalty, but something about this interrogation felt different. There was an eagerness in his commander's demeanor that seemed inappropriate for such serious circumstances. Dr. Richard Phillips, the military psychologist assigned to evaluate Elena's mental state, made careful notes on his tablet. His trained eye caught micro-expressions that others missed. The way Elena's pupils remained steady under stress, the controlled breathing pattern of someone managing their physiological responses, the slight tilt of her head that suggested active listening rather than defensive posturing. "The evidence against you is overwhelming," Stone pressed, moving around the table to stand directly in front of Elena. His imposing frame cast a shadow across her small form. 12 men are dead because of your treachery. The only question remaining is why. What did they pay you? How long have you been selling out your brothers and sisters in arms? If watching someone falsely accused of treason while the real traitor sits in judgment makes your blood boil, you're in the right place. Hit that like button right now to support stories of hidden heroes fighting against corruption from within. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because what Elena reveals next will make you question everything you think you know about loyalty and betrayal. This story proves that sometimes the most dangerous enemies wear the uniform of allies. Elena's tactical gear had been confiscated during her arrest, but investigators noted her personal equipment included specialized military-grade communication devices featuring advanced encryption capabilities and satellite connectivity technology. Her ruggedized tablet utilized battlefield-tested security protocols with multiple authentication layers designed specifically for high-stakes intelligence operations. These devices maintain secure data transmission even under the most hostile conditions, with reinforced screens capable of withstanding extreme pressure and electromagnetic interference that would disable standard civilian electronics completely. "Admiral," Elena said, her voice cutting through the hostile atmosphere like a blade, "may I ask how long you've been monitoring my activities?" Stone's eyes narrowed. "What kind of question is that?" "A relevant one. If I'm truly the security threat you believe me to be, surely military intelligence has been tracking my movements, communications, and activities for some time. I'm curious about the scope of that surveillance." Colonel Mitchell consulted her files. "Standard monitoring protocols have been in place for all personnel with your level of clearance, Major. Nothing beyond normal parameters." "Nothing beyond normal," Elena repeated thoughtfully. "So, no enhanced surveillance despite your concerns about operational security? No additional scrutiny of personnel with access to mission-critical information?" General Webb frowned. "Major, you're hardly in a position to be questioning our security protocols." "With respect, sir, I'm trying to understand how a breach of this magnitude could occur without triggering the automated alerts that should be standard for any unauthorized access to classified materials." Elena's tone remained respectful, but there was something underneath it, a depth of knowledge that shouldn't exist in someone of her rank and position. Stone stepped closer, his massive frame attempting to intimidate through proximity. "You're trying to deflect attention from your own crimes. Classic tradecraft for someone who has been caught red-handed." "Is it?" Elena asked. "Because someone with actual intelligence training would know that the best way to avoid suspicion after committing treason would be to disappear immediately, not stick around to face a tribunal. They certainly wouldn't request to examine the evidence against them." Captain Torres found himself leaning forward despite his loyalty to Stone. The logic was sound, even if he didn't want to acknowledge it. Why would a guilty person actively seek to prolong their exposure to scrutiny? Dr. Phillips made another note. Elena's body language showed no signs of deception, no micro-expressions of guilt, no physiological stress responses associated with lying under pressure. Her questions demonstrated sophisticated understanding of intelligence protocols that went well beyond what her official training record should have provided. "Your argument might be more compelling if we didn't have irrefutable proof of your guilt," Stone said, returning to his chair. "The access logs, the timing, the operational intelligence that was clearly provided to enemy forces, it all points to one conclusion." "Does it?" Elena asked. "Admiral, you mentioned that 12 operators are missing, presumed dead. Has that presumption been confirmed? Have bodies been recovered? Has there been official confirmation from the Syrian government or our intelligence assets in the region?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a misfired weapon. Stone's jaw tightened visibly. "That information is classified above your clearance level, Major. Which seems convenient, since I'm the one being accused of compromising those very operations." Elena's voice remained level, but her green eyes held a sharpness that made several tribunal members shift in their chairs. "If I'm truly responsible for their deaths, wouldn't the details of their fate be relevant to these proceedings?" Colonel Mitchell looked up from her files. "Major, the classification levels exist for operational security. We can't compromise ongoing rescue efforts or intelligence gathering by revealing sensitive details." "Rescue efforts," Elena repeated. "So, the 12 operators aren't confirmed dead after all. They're missing, and there are active efforts to locate them. That changes the timeline considerably, doesn't it?" Stone's face flushed red above his green military shirt. "The timeline changes nothing. Your treachery put those men in danger, whether they're alive or dead." "Actually, Admiral, it changes everything. Because if rescue operations are ongoing, that means the original mission parameters may still be in effect. And if that's the case, then someone in this room knows a great deal more about those operations than they're letting on. The accusation rippled through the chamber like electricity. General Webb raised his hand for silence. Major Rodriguez, you're perilously close to making accusations against this tribunal. I strongly advise you to reconsider your approach. I'm not making accusations, sir. I'm asking questions that should have been asked from the beginning. For instance, why was I arrested before any attempt was made to determine if my computer had been compromised by outside forces? Why wasn't my terminal subjected to forensic analysis before the evidence was presented as conclusive? Why are we proceeding with a tribunal for treason when the alleged victims of that treason haven't been confirmed as casualties? Captain Torres found himself taking notes despite himself. The questions were methodical, logical, and deeply troubling. He had assumed the evidence against Elena was ironclad, but her queries revealed gaps in the investigation that seemed almost deliberately overlooked. Dr. Phillips set down his tablet and studied Elena with professional fascination. Major, your line of questioning suggests extensive familiarity with intelligence protocols and investigative procedures. Where did you acquire such knowledge? Elena met his gaze directly. Military intelligence taught me to ask the right questions, Doctor. Perhaps they taught me too well. Stone slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing like gunfire. Enough games, Major. You're here because you betrayed your oath, your country, and your fellow soldiers. No amount of clever questioning will change that fact. Then you won't mind if I demonstrate exactly how someone could have compromised my computer access without my knowledge or participation, Elena said calmly. The room fell silent. Stone's eyes darted to Colonel Mitchell, who looked equally uncertain. What are you proposing? Mitchell asked. Give me access to a secure terminal. Allow me to show you exactly how the breach occurred. If I'm the traitor you believe me to be, I'll only be able to show you standard hacking techniques that any reasonably skilled individual might employ. But if I can demonstrate methods that require specialized knowledge and access that might suggest alternative explanations for the evidence against me. General Webb conferred quietly with his advisors before responding. This is highly irregular, Major. We cannot allow someone accused of treason to access classified systems. Then use an isolated system, something with no network connectivity, loaded only with dummy files that mirror the structure of our actual classified networks. If I can show you how the breach occurred using only publicly available information, then you'll know I'm guilty. But if I demonstrate techniques that require insider knowledge, Elena let the implication hang in the air. Stone's objection was immediate and forceful. This is nothing but a desperate stalling tactic. We have all the evidence we need for conviction. Admiral, Captain Torres said quietly, surprising everyone including himself, if Major Rodriguez can prove her innocence through technical demonstration, wouldn't that be preferable to executing someone who might be wrongly accused? The young officer's words carried unexpected weight. Stone turned on him with fury. Captain Torres, you will remember your place in these proceedings. But Torres had found his courage. Yes, sir. My place is to ensure justice is served, not just expedient resolution. Dr. Phillips nodded slowly. From a psychological perspective, Major Rodriguez's willingness to subject herself to technical scrutiny actually supports her claims of innocence. Guilty individuals typically seek to avoid additional examination of evidence, not request it. Elena watched the dynamics shift around the table with careful attention. Stone's growing agitation, Mitchell's professional curiosity, Torres's emerging doubts, Phillips's analytical interest. Each reaction told her something about the larger game being played. I have one more question before we proceed, Elena said, directing her words to the tribunal as a whole rather than Stone specifically. Has anyone verified that the 12 missing operators were actually following the mission parameters that were supposedly compromised? Or is it possible they were operating under different orders entirely? The question hit like a mortar round. Stone's face went pale, then flushed darker than before. That information is classified beyond your clearance level. Which brings us back to the fundamental question, Elena continued. How can I be guilty of compromising a mission whose parameters I'm not cleared to know? How can I be responsible for betraying operational details I shouldn't have access to in the first place? Colonel Mitchell was rapidly typing on her tablet, cross-referencing Elena's clearance levels with the classified materials she allegedly accessed. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as she worked through the data. Admiral, Mitchell said slowly, Major Rodriguez raises a valid point. Her clearance level shouldn't have provided access to the specific operational parameters that were allegedly compromised. The access logs show her credentials were used to view files that technically should have been blocked by the security protocols. Stone's jaw worked silently for several seconds before he responded. Obviously, the breach was more extensive than initially believed. She must have found a way to escalate her privileges. That would be visible in the system logs, Mitchell countered. Privilege escalation leaves digital fingerprints that are impossible to erase completely. I should be able to trace exactly how such escalation occurred. Elena nodded. Colonel Mitchell, I appreciate your analytical approach. Perhaps you could also verify whether the access logs show any other anomalous activity during the time frame in question. If someone was using my credentials to access classified materials, they might have left other traces of their presence. The cybersecurity expert was already diving deeper into her analysis, her professional instincts overriding the presumption of guilt that had initially guided the proceedings. There are some irregularities in the timestamp sequences, she admitted. Nothing conclusive, but worth investigating further. Stone's agitation was becoming increasingly obvious to everyone in the room. Colonel Mitchell, we have clear evidence of Major Rodriguez's guilt. These fishing expeditions serve no purpose except to delay justice. Admiral, General Webb interjected, if there are legitimate questions about the evidence, we have an obligation to address them. The integrity of our justice system depends on thorough investigation, not expedient resolution. Elena watched Stone's reaction carefully. His eagerness to rush the proceedings was becoming a liability, drawing attention to itself in ways that suggested deeper motivations. A truly innocent commander seeking justice for fallen soldiers would welcome any investigation that might reveal the truth. I propose a brief recess, Webb announced. Colonel Mitchell, I want you to conduct a thorough forensic analysis of the access logs and system activity during the relevant time frame. Dr. Phillips, continue your psychological evaluation. Captain Torres, review the operational timeline and look for any discrepancies or anomalies. Stone stood abruptly. General Webb, with respect, we don't need to waste time on elaborate investigations. The evidence is clear, the crime is evident, and justice demands swift action. Justice demands thorough investigation, Admiral. We'll reconvene in 2 hours for Colonel Mitchell's preliminary findings. As the tribunal members began to disperse, Elena remained seated, her restraints preventing easy movement. Captain Torres approached her with obvious hesitation. Major Rodriguez, he said quietly, I need to ask you something off the record. Elena looked up at him with those unsettling green eyes. Yes, Captain? The operational parameters for the Syrian mission. You seem to know things about them that aren't in any briefing materials I've seen. How is that possible? Elena was quiet for a long moment before responding. Captain Torres, what do you know about the intelligence support activity? The question hit Torres like cold water. ISA was one of the military's most classified units, so secret that its very existence was officially denied. I'm not cleared for information about organizations that may or may not exist. Of course not, Elena said softly. But hypothetically, if such an organization did exist, and if it occasionally placed deep cover operatives within conventional military units for extended observation missions, those operatives might have access to information that seems inconsistent with their apparent rank and position. Torres felt his world tilting on its axis. Are you saying... I'm not saying anything, Captain. I'm simply suggesting that there might be explanations for apparent inconsistencies that go beyond the obvious conclusions. Did you catch that detail about the encrypted messages? Comment below if you spotted the clue that Elena is more than she appears. Share this video before the big reveal. Your friends need to see how a master strategist operates under pressure. The next 10 minutes will change everything you thought you knew about this case. During the recess, Elena was moved to a secure holding area while the investigation continued. Through the reinforced glass, she could see analysts working frantically at computer terminals, diving deeper into system logs and communication records. The activity level suggested they were finding things that complicated the simple narrative of her guilt. Colonel Mitchell emerged from the analysis center looking deeply troubled. She approached Admiral Stone, who was pacing in the corridor like a caged predator. Admiral, we have a problem. Stone's voice was sharp with tension. What kind of problem? The deeper we dig into the system logs, the more anomalies we find. The access patterns don't match Major Rodriguez's normal usage behavior. The timing sequences suggest automated tools rather than human input. And there are encrypted communications embedded in the data streams that originated from outside our network entirely. Stone's face flushed dark red. Are you suggesting our security systems were compromised by external forces? I'm suggesting that's one possible explanation for the evidence we're seeing. Another possibility is that someone with intimate knowledge of our systems deliberately created a false trail leading to Major Rodriguez. The Admiral's jaw worked silently before he responded. Colonel, I understand your desire to be thorough, but we cannot allow conspiracy theories to undermine clear evidence. Major Rodriguez had means, motive, and opportunity. The access logs place her at the scene of the crime. That should be sufficient for conviction. Mitchell studied Stone's face carefully. Admiral, what was Major Rodriguez's motive? We've found no evidence of financial gain, no communications with foreign agents, no indicators of coercion or blackmail. What reason would she have for committing treason? The question hung in the air unanswered. Stone turned away, ostensibly to check his secure phone, but Mitchell noticed his hands were trembling slightly. Captain Torres joined them in the corridor, his own investigation having raised additional questions. Admiral, I've been reviewing the operational timeline for the Syrian mission. There are some discrepancies I'd like to discuss. Stone's response was sharp. What kind of discrepancies? The mission briefing materials show one set of parameters, but the actual deployment orders in the classified files show different coordinates, different timing, and different objectives. It's as if there were two separate missions planned for the same time frame. Mitchell's eyes widened. That would explain the access pattern anomalies. If someone was running a parallel operation, they would need to access files from both mission sets, creating the unusual data signatures we're seeing. Stone's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. He read it quickly, his face growing paler with each line of text. "Excuse me," he said abruptly, walking away from the others. Mitchell and Torres exchanged glances. "Captain," Mitchell said quietly, "how well do you know Admiral Stone?" "I've worked for him for 3 years," Torres replied. "He's been like a mentor to me, but recently his behavior has been unusual, more secretive, more agitated. I attributed it to the stress of the Syrian situation, but now I'm wondering if there's something else going on." Through the secure glass, Elena watched the interactions in the corridor with professional interest. She could read body language and micro-expressions well enough to understand that the investigation was revealing complications that threatened the simple narrative of her guilt. Stone's increasing agitation was particularly telling. Innocent commanders didn't typically react with such obvious distress to thorough investigations of potential treason. Dr. Phillips appeared beside her holding area, his tablet filled with psychological assessment notes. "Major Rodriguez, I'd like to continue our evaluation if you're willing." Elena nodded. "Of course, Doctor. Your responses to stress throughout these proceedings have been atypical. Most individuals facing treason charges would show significantly elevated anxiety, defensive behavior, or emotional breakdown. You've remained remarkably composed. How do you explain that?" Elena considered the question carefully. "Doctor, I've been trained to manage stress responses in high-pressure situations. It's part of standard military conditioning." "Yes, but your level of control suggests training that goes well beyond standard military preparation. The techniques you are using to regulate your physiological responses are consistent with advanced psychological conditioning, typically reserved for intelligence operatives or special operations personnel." "Perhaps I'm simply naturally calm under pressure," Elena suggested. Philip smiled. "Major, I've evaluated thousands of military personnel over 20 years of service. Your psychological profile is consistent with individuals who have undergone specialized training in stress resistance, interrogation survival, and emotional compartmentalization. These are not natural traits. They're learned skills that require extensive conditioning." Elena met his gaze directly. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" "I'm suggesting that your official service record may not reflect the full scope of your training and experience. And if that's the case, it raises interesting questions about why you're really here and what's really happening with this investigation." Before Elena could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the Pentagon. Red lights flashed in the corridors as security personnel moved with urgent purpose. Through the glass, Elena could see analysts abandoning their workstations and heading for emergency stations. Colonel Mitchell rushed back to the holding area, her face tense with concern. "We have a situation. Someone is actively attempting to penetrate our most secure networks. The attack started 20 minutes ago, and it's escalating rapidly. Elena stood slowly, her restraints limiting her movement. Colonel, what type of attack are we talking about? Sophisticated coordinated assault on multiple system vectors. Whoever's doing this has intimate knowledge of our security protocols and system architecture. They're moving through our defenses like they have a roadmap. Are they accessing the same systems that were allegedly compromised in my case? Mitchell paused, realizing the implication. Yes. The attack is focused specifically on the intelligence databases related to Middle Eastern operations. They're going after exactly the same files you're accused of stealing. Elena's voice carried a subtle edge of urgency. Colonel, I need you to trace the attack vectors and compare them to the access patterns from my alleged breach. If the techniques are similar, it suggests the same individual or organization was responsible for both incidents. Major, you're hardly in a position to be directing our cybersecurity response, Mitchell replied, but her tone lacked conviction. Actually, Colonel, I might be the only person in this building who can help you stop this attack, because I have a feeling it's being conducted by the same people who framed me for treason. The room fell silent except for the continuing alarm signals. Mitchell looked at Elena with new assessment, seeing past the restraints and accusations to evaluate the woman herself. What aren't you telling us, Major? Elena's green eyes held depths that seemed far older than her apparent age. Colonel Mitchell, what do you know about deep cover intelligence operations that are so classified they don't appear in any official records? Before Mitchell could answer, Admiral Stone burst into the area, his face flushed with exertion and panic. Colonel Mitchell, I need you to shut down all external network connections immediately. We're under attack and we need to isolate our systems. Admiral, shutting down external connections won't stop an attack that's already inside our network. We need to trace the source and counter their methods. Stone's agitation was becoming increasingly obvious. Just follow orders, Colonel. Shut everything down. Elena watched Stone's behavior with sharp attention. Admiral, shutting down external connections would also prevent us from tracing the attackers back to their source. It would allow them to complete their mission and escape without consequences. Is that really what you want? Stone whirled on her with fury. You're in no position to question tactical decisions, traitor. But I am in a position to observe that your tactical decisions seem designed to help the attackers rather than stop them, Elena replied calmly. The accusation hung in the air like an unexploded ordnance. Captain Torres, Colonel Mitchell, and Dr. Phillips all turned to stare at Stone, whose face had gone from flushed to pale in the span of seconds. Admiral, Torres said slowly, Major Rodriguez has a point. Standard protocol for this type of attack would be to maintain connectivity while implementing countermeasures. Cutting external access would protect the attackers more than us. Stone's hands were visibly shaking now. Captain Torres, you will follow orders without question. Yes, sir, Torres replied, but his eyes remained fixed on his commander with growing suspicion. Elena seized the moment. Admiral Stone, I have a question for you. How long have you been taking payments from foreign intelligence services? The question exploded through the room like a flashbang grenade. Stone staggered backward as if physically struck. How dare you accuse me of... I'm not accusing you of anything, Admiral. I'm simply asking a question based on the evidence I've observed. Your desperate attempts to rush this tribunal, your resistance to thorough investigation, your tactical decisions that favor the attackers. These behaviors are consistent with someone who has a vested interest in preventing the truth from emerging. Colonel Mitchell was already moving to her secure terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she initiated traces on the ongoing attack. Admiral, Major Rodriguez is right about the tactical response. I'm maintaining network connectivity and implementing active countermeasures. Stone moved toward Mitchell with threatening intent. Colonel, I gave you a direct order. Elena's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Colonel Mitchell, check Admiral Stone's personal access logs for the past 6 months. Pay particular attention to any communications with external servers or unusual file transfer activities. Stone lunged toward Elena's holding area, his massive frame propelled by desperation and rage. But Captain Torres stepped into his path, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. Admiral, I think you need to step back and calm down, Torres said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. Stone's eyes darted around the room, taking in the faces watching him with growing suspicion and understanding. The careful facade he had maintained for months was crumbling in real time, and everyone present could see the collapse happening. This is insane, Stone said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're all being manipulated by a trained intelligence operative. Can't you see what she's doing? Elena smiled for the first time since entering the Pentagon that morning. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Admiral, you just made a very interesting slip. How did you know I was a trained intelligence operative? That information doesn't appear anywhere in my official service record. The room fell silent except for the clicking of Mitchell's fingers on her keyboard as she delved deeper into the system logs. Stone's face cycled through expressions of panic, rage, and dawning realization that his carefully constructed deception was falling apart. Admiral Marcus Stone, Elena said, her voice carrying authority that seemed to fill the room, despite her physical restraints. You are under suspicion of treason, espionage, and conspiracy to commit murder of United States military personnel. Captain Torres, I recommend you place Admiral Stone under immediate arrest while Colonel Mitchell completes her analysis of the evidence. Torres looked at Stone, the man who had been his mentor and role model, then at Elena, who seemed to understand far more about the situation than anyone had realized. Admiral Stone, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to surrender your sidearm and submit to detention pending investigation. Stone's hand moved toward his weapon, but Torres was younger and faster. Within seconds, Stone was disarmed and restrained, the roles completely reversed from an hour earlier. Colonel Mitchell looked up from her terminal with shock and triumph in her equal measure. I found it. Admiral Stone's personal access codes were used to communicate with external servers registered to a front company with ties to hostile intelligence services. The payments Elena asked about, they're here. $2.7 million transferred over 18 months in exchange for classified intelligence. Elena nodded with grim satisfaction. Colonel, I believe you will also find that Admiral Stone was responsible for creating the false evidence against me and for scheduling this tribunal at the exact time when his associates would launch their final cyber attack against our systems. I was meant to be a convenient scapegoat while the real criminals completed their mission. Dr. Phillips stared at Elena with professional fascination and dawning respect. Major Rodriguez, or whoever you really are, I have to ask, how long have you known about Admiral Stone's activities? Elena's green eyes held depths that suggested experiences far beyond her apparent age and rank. Doctor, what I'm about to tell you will require security clearances that most people in this room don't possess. But given the circumstances, I think it's time for complete honesty. She looked indirectly at each person in the room before continuing. My name is Elena Rodriguez, but I'm not actually a major in military intelligence. I'm a deep cover operative with the intelligence support activity, and I've been investigating Admiral Stone's treason for the past 18 months. The revelation hit like thunder in a clear sky. Torres sat heavily in the nearest chair, his worldview completely shattered. Mitchell stopped typing and stared at Elena with new understanding. Phillips made rapid notes on his tablet, his psychological profile of Elena suddenly making perfect sense. The 12 missing operators in Syria, Elena continued, aren't missing at all. They're conducting a counterintelligence operation designed to roll up Admiral Stone's network of contacts and co-conspirators. This entire tribunal was a carefully orchestrated trap to force Stone into revealing himself, while his associates attempted their final data theft. Stone, now restrained in the chair where Elena had sat accused just hours earlier, looked at her with hatred and grudging respect. How long have you known? Elena's smile was cold and professional. Admiral, I've known since the day you first approached me about joining your inner circle of trusted officers. Every conversation we've had, every piece of intelligence you've shared with your handlers, every payment you've received, it's all been monitored and recorded. But the evidence against you was perfect, Stone protested. The access logs, the timing, the computer forensics, how did you fake all of that? I didn't fake anything, Admiral. You did. You created false evidence to frame me because your handlers demanded a scapegoat for the Syrian operation. What you didn't realize is that we've been feeding you false information for months, designed specifically to flush out your entire network. Colonel Mitchell was working frantically at her terminal, tracing the ongoing cyber attack back to its source. The attack vectors are being systematically dismantled. Whoever's running the counter-operation on our side knows exactly what they're doing. Elena nodded. The 12 missing operators include some of the military's most skilled cyber warfare specialists. They have been waiting for this moment to spring their trap. Captain Torres found his voice again. Ma'am, what's your real rank and position? Elena's restraints were being removed by security personnel who had arrived with new orders. As the metal cuffs fell away, she rubbed her wrists and stood with fluid grace that demonstrated physical conditioning far beyond standard military fitness. "My actual rank and position are classified, Captain, but you can call me Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, and my call sign—" She paused, looking directly at Admiral Stone, whose face had gone completely pale as he realized the full scope of how thoroughly he had been outmaneuvered. The alarms throughout the Pentagon suddenly fell silent. Colonel Mitchell looked up from her terminal with triumph written across her face. "The cyber attack has been completely neutralized. All hostile access has been terminated, and the attackers have been traced back to their physical locations." Elena nodded with satisfaction. "Admiral Stone, your network of contacts and co-conspirators is being rolled up as we speak. The payments you received, the intelligence you sold, the American lives you put at risk, it's all documented and admissible as evidence." Stone slumped in his restraints, the weight of his situation finally becoming clear. "This was all a setup from the beginning. From the moment you first decided to sell out your country, yes. We've been building a case against you and your associates for over a year. Today was simply the culmination of that operation." Dr. Phillips closed his tablet and studied Elena with professional admiration. "Your psychological conditioning is remarkable. Even under the stress of false accusation and potential execution, you maintained perfect emotional control and tactical awareness." Elena's green eyes held depths that spoke of experiences in places that didn't appear on any map. "Doctor, when you've been trained to operate in environments where discovery means death, a military tribunal feels almost peaceful by comparison." Captain Torres approached Elena with obvious respect and no small amount of awe. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I should have recognized that the evidence against you was too convenient, too perfect." Elena placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Captain Torres, you did exactly what a good officer should do. When you saw inconsistencies in the evidence, you asked questions. When you realized something was wrong, you took action. That's the kind of integrity that makes our military strong." Colonel Mitchell was printing out reams of evidence from her investigation. "Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, the forensic evidence we've gathered today will be more than sufficient to convict Admiral Stone and dismantle his entire spy network. This case will be studied in intelligence schools for decades." Elena nodded. "Colonel, your analytical skills and refusal to accept surface explanations were critical to the success of this operation. Without your thorough investigation, Admiral Stone might have continued operating for years." The door to the secure area opened to admit a stream of officials, representatives from the CIA, NSA, FBI, and military intelligence services. Elena's handler, a woman in her 50s wearing the uniform of a Navy admiral, approached with barely contained relief. "Black Widow," the admiral said, using Elena's operational call sign. "Excellent work. The network has been completely rolled up. 12 hostile operatives captured, 4 safe houses raided, and enough evidence seized to prevent similar operations for years." Elena's transformation was remarkable to witness. The seemingly fragile major accused of treason had revealed herself to be one of America's most capable intelligence operators, someone whose very existence was classified at levels that most government officials would never access. Share this video right now before Elena drops the bombshell that will leave everyone speechless. If you've ever felt powerless against corruption, what happens next will restore your faith in justice. The Admiral is about to learn that he picked a fight with the wrong person. As the afternoon wore on, the full scope of the counterintelligence operation became clear. Admiral Stone's network had included contacts in 12 countries, had compromised dozens of operations over 18 months, and had been responsible for the deaths of at least 6 American operatives. The Syrian mission that had triggered the day's events was actually a carefully orchestrated trap that had successfully neutralized the entire network. Elena stood in the Pentagon's secure briefing room, no longer restrained or accused, but recognized as one of the intelligence community's most valuable assets. Her gray t-shirt and military pants remained the same, but everything else about her had changed. The deference of seasoned intelligence professionals, the respectful attention of military leaders, the acknowledgement of expertise that went far beyond her apparent age and rank. "Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez," Admiral Stone said from his position in restraints, "I have to ask, how long have you really been doing this kind of work?" Elena's smile held secrets that would never appear in any official record. Admiral, let's just say that some stories are too classified to tell, even in settings like this. Captain Torres approached her with a question that had been building throughout the afternoon. Ma'am, when you first entered this room in handcuffs, accused of treason, how did you know you would be vindicated? Elena looked around the room at the faces watching her, former accusers who had become allies, investigators who had discovered truth through careful analysis, and officers who had learned that appearances could be more deceptive than anyone imagined. Captain, I didn't know I would be vindicated. I knew I was innocent, and I trusted that the truth would emerge if good people like yourselves did your jobs with integrity and thoroughness. Sometimes that's all you can do. Trust in the process and the people committed to justice. As evening approached and the immediate crisis passed, Elena found herself alone with her handler, preparing for the next phase of an operation that would continue long after the day's revelations. The Syrian team sends their compliments, her handler reported. The intelligence gathered from Admiral Stone's network has already prevented 3 separate terrorist attacks and identified compromised assets in 7 friendly nations. Elena nodded, her mind already shifting to the challenges ahead. What's the status on the overseas contacts? Have we identified all the network participants? Most of them. But there are indications of a larger organization, something that goes beyond Admiral Stone's specific operation. We may need Black Widow to go deeper undercover for the next phase. Elena's green eyes reflected the weight of responsibilities that most people would never understand. How deep? Her handler's expression was grave. Deep enough that Elena Rodriguez might need to disappear entirely. The next assignment will require a completely new identity, new background, new life. Are you prepared for that level of commitment? Elena looked through the secure windows at the Washington skyline, thinking about the choices that had brought her to this moment and the choices that lay ahead. I've been preparing for that possibility since the day I took this oath. When do we start? As night fell over the Pentagon, the most secure building in the world continued its eternal vigil. In classified briefing rooms and secured communication centers, the work of protecting American interests continued around the clock. Elena Rodriguez, also known as Black Widow, prepared for her next mission with the quiet professionalism that had made her one of the intelligence community's most valuable assets. The day had begun with accusations of treason and ended with the exposure of actual traitors. Admiral Stone faced life imprisonment or execution for his crimes. Colonel Mitchell had been recognized for her analytical brilliance in uncovering the truth. Captain Torres had learned valuable lessons about the complexity of military justice. Dr. Phillips had gathered psychological insights that would inform his work for years to come. But for Elena, the day's events were simply another chapter in an ongoing story of service that required sacrifices most people would never understand. Her true identity remained classified. Her real achievements would never be publicly acknowledged. Her actual rank and position existed only in files that most government officials would never see. As she prepared to leave the Pentagon that evening, Elena reflected on the choices that had brought her to this life. The decision to serve her country in ways that required anonymity. The commitment to missions that demanded everything while offering no recognition. The willingness to be misunderstood, underestimated, and occasionally accused of the very crimes she worked to prevent. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new opportunities to serve in the shadows. But tonight, justice had been served, truth had prevailed, and the nation was safer because good people had refused to accept convenient explanations when the evidence demanded deeper investigation. Elena Rodriguez, major in military intelligence, would officially receive a commendation for her cooperation in exposing Admiral Stone's treason. The real Elena Rodriguez, whose identity remained classified at the highest levels, would continue her work in places that didn't appear on any map, pursuing threats that most people would never know existed. The Pentagon's marble corridors echoed with the footsteps of those who served in the light of public recognition and democratic oversight. But in the shadows between those footsteps, other servants moved silently, protecting freedoms they would never be thanked for defending. As Elena walked toward her next assignment and her next identity, she carried with her the satisfaction of a mission completed and the knowledge that somewhere in Syria, 12 American operators were safely completing their own mission, protected by the sacrifice of anonymity that defined the intelligence community's most dedicated professionals. The war room had indeed gone silent when she revealed her call sign, but the real silence was the one she would carry into whatever came next, the silence of classified service, unsung heroism, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing the truth, even when the world believed something else entirely. The Pentagon's secure communication systems hummed with activity as news of Admiral Stone's arrest rippled through the intelligence community. Within the classified networks that connected America's most sensitive operations, encrypted messages flowed between agencies that rarely acknowledged each other's existence. The Black Widow operation had succeeded beyond all projections, but success in the intelligence world often brought complications that ordinary citizens never imagined. Elena stood in the secure briefing room, her gray t-shirt and military pants unchanged from the morning, but her entire world transformed. The restraints were gone, replaced by the respectful attention of intelligence professionals who understood exactly what she had accomplished. Her handler, Admiral Sarah Chen, reviewed operational reports on a secure tablet, while Elena mentally prepared for the complex aftermath that always followed successful deep-cover missions. "The ripple effects are already beginning," Chen reported. Stone's network included assets in allied nations who are now scrambling to cover their tracks. The British, Germans, and Israelis are all conducting emergency security reviews. 3 foreign intelligence officers have requested asylum in exchange for information about Stone's activities. Elena nodded, her green eyes reflecting the weight of responsibilities that extended far beyond the day's immediate crisis. "What's the timeline for the prosecutions?" "Stone will face a closed military tribunal within 30 days. His co-conspirators will be handled through various channels depending on their citizenship and level of involvement. The evidence you helped gather will support prosecutions for the next 2 years." Captain Torres approached them with obvious hesitation. Despite the day's revelations, he still struggled to reconcile the accused traitor he had known that morning with the legendary operative standing before him. "Ma'am, I have a question that's been troubling me. When you were in restraints this morning, facing potential execution, how did you maintain such complete composure?" Elena studied the young officer with the patience of someone who had mentored countless military personnel throughout her career. "Captain, what do you know about the psychological conditioning required for deep cover operations?" "Only what I've read in declassified studies. Stress inoculation, emotional regulation, maintaining cover identity under extreme pressure." "That's the foundation," Elena agreed. "But the deeper training involves something more fundamental, learning to separate your immediate circumstances from your larger mission. When you know your actions serve a purpose greater than your personal safety, it becomes easier to accept whatever temporary hardships are necessary." Dr. Phillips, still processing his complete misreading of Elena's psychological profile, joined their conversation. "Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, your stress responses throughout the interrogation were unlike anything I've encountered. Even knowing what I know now, I'm not sure I fully understand how you maintain such control." Elena's smile held depths that spoke of experiences in places that would never appear in official records. "Doctor, imagine you're an actor who has spent 18 months preparing for the most important performance of your career. When the curtain rises, you don't break character because the audience is hostile. You trust your preparation and deliver the performance that will serve the larger story." "But the stakes were life and death," Phillips persisted. "A single mistake could have resulted in your execution." "Yes," Elena agreed, "which is precisely why the training is so intensive and why only certain individuals are selected for this type of work. The psychological profile required for deep cover operations includes not just stress tolerance, but the ability to maintain perspective, even when facing personal destruction." Colonel Mitchell approached with a tablet displaying network analysis results. "Lieutenant Colonel, the forensic evidence we've gathered reveals the full scope of Admiral Stone's activities. Over the past 18 months, he provided intelligence that compromised 47 operations, resulted in the deaths of 9 American operatives, and generated $2.7 million in payments from hostile intelligence services." Elena's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Colonel, those 9 operatives who died, I knew 6 of them personally. They were good people doing important work. Stone's betrayal didn't just compromise missions, it destroyed families and ended careers dedicated to protecting American interests." The weight of those losses settled over the room like smoke. These weren't abstract casualties of war, but specific individuals whose lives had been sold for money by someone they trusted to protect them. "Which brings us to the question of justice," Admiral Chen said, consulting her secure tablet. Stone will face the maximum penalties under military law, but the larger question involves the systemic changes needed to prevent similar betrayals in the future. Elena nodded. Admiral, the Stone case revealed vulnerabilities in our security protocols that go beyond individual treachery. The fact that one person could access and sell such sensitive intelligence suggests we need fundamental changes to how we compartmentalize information and monitor access. Captain Torres was taking notes, recognizing an educational opportunity that might never come again. Ma'am, what changes would you recommend? Enhanced behavioral monitoring, stricter compartmentalization of sensitive intelligence, and most importantly, better psychological evaluation of personnel with access to classified materials. Stone's financial motivations should have been detected through routine monitoring of his lifestyle and spending patterns. Elite military cybersecurity training programs utilized advanced educational technology platforms designed for classified learning environments. These specialized systems provided comprehensive instruction in network penetration testing, advanced cryptography, and counterintelligence techniques through secure military-grade learning management systems. The platforms featured real-time simulation capabilities that replicated actual threat scenarios encountered by intelligence professionals, offering hands-on experience with classified tools and methodologies unavailable through conventional educational channels. Dr. Phillips closed his tablet and studied Elena with professional fascination. Lieutenant Colonel, I need to completely revise my understanding of deep-cover psychological conditioning. Your ability to maintain character while simultaneously conducting counterintelligence operations represents a level of mental compartmentalization that challenges conventional psychological theory. Elena's response reflected years of experience with academic interest in her work. Doctor, the human mind is more adaptable than most people realize. When properly trained and motivated, individuals can maintain multiple layers of identity and purpose simultaneously. The key is ensuring that the core mission never conflicts with the cover identity's apparent motivations. But maintaining such compartmentalization for 18 months, including today's extreme stress testing, suggests psychological conditioning that goes far beyond anything in the published literature. Which is why much of the research remains classified, Elena replied. The techniques used to prepare operatives for deep cover missions are considered too sensitive for academic publication. They represent decades of refinement based on real-world operations that officially never happened. Admiral Chen checked her secure communications device and frowned. We have a developing situation. Intelligence indicates that Stone's arrest has triggered emergency protocols among his international contacts. Several high-value intelligence assets are requesting extraction or elimination to prevent their exposure. Elena's transformation was immediate and visible. The patient instructor disappeared, replaced by the tactical professional who had spent 18 months building the case against Admiral Stone. Admiral, what's the timeline for these emergency protocols? Unknown, but probably measured in hours rather than days. Stone's contacts know that his arrest means comprehensive analysis of his communications and activities. They're moving to protect themselves and eliminate evidence. Which creates opportunities, Elena observed. Desperate people make mistakes. If we can monitor their emergency communications and extraction attempts, we might be able to roll up assets that have remained hidden for years. Captain Torres watched this exchange with growing understanding of how intelligence operations actually functioned. Ma'am, are you saying that Admiral Stone's arrest was just the beginning of a larger operation? Elena's green eyes held the calculating patience of a chess master who could see moves that others missed. Captain, successful intelligence work isn't about individual arrests or single operations. It's about creating cascading effects that expose entire networks and disrupt hostile activities for years to come. The Syrian mission that supposedly triggered today's events, Admiral Chen added, was actually designed to force Stone into making communications with his handlers that we could intercept and analyze. Everything that happened today was choreographed to maximize the intelligence value of Stone's eventual exposure. Dr. Phillips shook his head in amazement. So, Major Rodriguez's arrest and tribunal were theater designed to make Stone and his contacts believe they were safe to proceed with their activities? Precisely, Elena confirmed. The best way to catch someone in a conspiracy is to make them believe their plan is working perfectly. Stone thought he had successfully framed me for his crimes while his associates completed their data theft. Instead, Every move he made provided additional evidence of his guilt and exposed his entire network. Colonel Mitchell was monitoring incoming intelligence reports on her tablet. The international responses are accelerating. British intelligence reports unusual activity among known Stone contacts in London. German federal intelligence indicates similar patterns in Berlin. Even the Israelis are seeing movement among assets they've been watching. Elena nodded with grim satisfaction. The network is larger than we initially assessed. Stone's arrest is forcing previously dormant assets to reveal themselves through their emergency responses. Next week's story features another woman who turned the tables on her accusers in the most unexpected way. Subscribe now and hit the thanks button if you believe that truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how powerful the people trying to bury it. Admiral Chen consulted her secure tablet before addressing the room. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, given the international implications of this operation, higher authorities are requesting your immediate briefing at a classified location. The scope of Stone's network suggests connections to ongoing operations that require your direct input. Elena understood the implications immediately. Admiral, are we talking about operations that go beyond Stone's specific network? Connections to larger hostile intelligence activities? That's what we need to determine. Your 18 months of deep cover work with Stone may have exposed patterns that connect to other ongoing investigations. The intelligence community needs your first-hand knowledge to assess the broader implications. Captain Torres looked confused. Ma'am, if Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez has been working undercover for 18 months, what happens to her cover identity now? How does someone return to normal life after this kind of operation? Elena's smile carried shadows that spoke of sacrifices most people would never understand. Captain, operatives at my level don't really have normal lives to return to. Each mission leads to the next. Each identity serves its purpose and then disappears when no longer needed. But what about family, friends, personal relationships? How do you maintain connections to the civilian world? The question hung in the air with weight that surprised everyone in the room. Elena was quiet for a long moment before responding. Captain, the life you're describing, family, friends, personal relationships, those are luxuries that most deep cover operatives give up when they accept this level of service. The mission becomes your family. Your fellow operatives become your friends. Your personal relationships exist only as elements of whatever cover identity serves the current operation. Dr. Phillips made notes with obvious fascination. That level of personal sacrifice represents psychological costs that must be extraordinary. How do individuals cope with such complete separation from conventional human connections? Elena's response reflected years of philosophical consideration about her chosen path. Doctor, most people derive meaning from their personal relationships and individual achievements. Operatives like me derive meaning from service to something larger than ourselves. The satisfaction of knowing that our work protects people who will never know we exist, prevents catastrophes that will never make headlines, preserves freedoms that most citizens take for granted. But at what personal cost? Phillips pressed. Elena looked through the secure windows at the Washington skyline, considering how to explain choices that most people would never face. The same cost paid by soldiers who die protecting strangers, doctors who spend their lives treating patients in remote locations, researchers who dedicate decades to solving problems that may not be resolved in their lifetimes. Some forms of service require everything, and some people are willing to give everything. Admiral Chen checked her secure communications again. Lieutenant Colonel, we need to move to the next phase of briefings. The international implications are expanding faster than initially projected. Elena nodded, her mind already shifting to the complex challenges ahead, but Captain Torres stepped forward with one final question. Ma'am, I need to ask this. When Admiral Stone demanded to know your call sign, when you answered Black Widow, what was going through your mind? That moment when you finally dropped your cover and revealed who you really are. Elena was quiet for several seconds, remembering the weight of that moment, when 18 months of careful deception ended with two words that changed everything. Captain, I was thinking about the 9 operatives who died because of Stone's betrayal, about their families who will never know the full truth of how their loved ones were lost, about the countless Americans who sleep safely because people like those 9 operatives stand watch in the darkness. She paused, her green eyes reflecting depths that spoke of experiences in places that existed only in classified files. When I said Black Widow, I wasn't revealing who I am. I was honoring who they were and ensuring that their sacrifice meant something. The room fell silent as the full weight of Elena's words settled over everyone present. This wasn't just about successful counterintelligence work or exposed traitors. It was about the human cost of protecting a nation that would never fully understand the price paid for its security. Admiral Chen gathered her materials, signaling the end of the immediate debrief. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened here today will remain classified at the highest levels. The successful exposure of Admiral Stone's network represents one of the most significant counterintelligence victories in recent years, but its true scope must remain hidden to protect ongoing operations and intelligence sources. As the various officials began to disperse, Elena remained behind to collect her thoughts and prepare for whatever came next. The day had begun with accusations of treason and ended with the exposure of actual traitors, but in the intelligence world, endings were rarely final. Success often created new challenges, new threats, new opportunities for service that demanded everything while offering no recognition. Dr. Phillips approached her one final time. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, I have to say that today has fundamentally changed my understanding of what deep cover operations require from the individuals who undertake them. Your psychological resilience and tactical awareness represent capabilities that go far beyond conventional military training. Elena's response reflected years of experience with academic interest in her work. Doctor, the individuals selected for this type of service aren't superhuman. We're simply people who have found meaning in missions that require us to become whatever the situation demands. Today I was an accused traitor. Tomorrow, I might be an international businesswoman, a graduate student, or a traveling journalist. The identity changes, but the mission remains constant. And that mission is? Elena looked toward the secure windows, where the lights of Washington flickered against the gathering darkness. To stand between the American people and those who would harm them, using whatever tools and identities are necessary to ensure that our citizens can live their lives without fear of the threats they'll never know existed. As Elena prepared to leave the Pentagon for her next assignment, she reflected on the day's events and their larger meaning. Admiral Stone would face justice for his betrayal, but his exposure had revealed vulnerabilities in American security that would require years to address completely. The international network of contacts and co-conspirators would be systematically dismantled, but new threats would inevitably emerge to take their place. The work would continue, conducted by people whose names would never appear in history books, whose achievements would never be publicly recognized, whose sacrifices would be measured in threats prevented rather than glory gained. Elena Rodriguez, also known as Black Widow, was one of many such individuals who had chosen service over personal recognition, mission over individual achievement, duty over comfort. The immediate crisis had been resolved. Admiral Stone was in custody, his network exposed, and the Syrian operation successfully concluded. Elena's 18-month deep cover mission had achieved its objectives beyond all projections. The American intelligence community was safer, more aware of its vulnerabilities, and better prepared to prevent similar betrayals in the future. But as Elena gathered her personal effects and prepared for departure, Admiral Chen approached with a secure communication device. Black Widow, we have a priority message from Langley. Eyes only, classification level beyond normal access. Elena accepted the device and entered her authentication codes. The message was brief but loaded with implications that would reshape her immediate future. Moscow Station reports asset compromise. Deep cover operative requesting emergency extraction. Hostile intelligence services conducting systematic sweep of American assets. Black Widow protocols authorized. Report to Andrews Air Force Base within 6 hours for immediate deployment. Elena looked at the message timestamp, 11:57 p.m. Less than 24 hours from her arrest as a suspected traitor to deployment on another classified mission halfway around the world. She deleted the message and returned the communication device to Admiral Chen, who was watching her with the expression of someone who understood the weight of what had been requested. Moscow? Chen asked quietly. Elena nodded. Apparently the Stone network had connections we haven't fully identified yet. Someone in Russia is cleaning house, and they're targeting American assets who might have information about Stone's activities. For the first time that day, Elena felt something approaching exhaustion. Not physical tiredness, but the deeper weariness that came from recognizing that the work was truly never finished. Each successful mission created new responsibilities, new dangers, new opportunities to serve at personal cost that most people would never understand. "Are you prepared for immediate deployment?" Chen asked. Elena's smile held the quiet resignation of someone who had long ago accepted that her life would be measured in missions rather than years, achievements rather than relationships, service rather than personal fulfillment. "Admiral, I've been prepared for immediate deployment since the day I took the oath. The only question is whether the mission will allow me to come home when it's finished." Admiral Chen handed Elena a sealed envelope containing her new identity documents and mission parameters. "Black Widow, your cover for this operation will be completely different from anything you've done before. You'll be going deeper than we've ever asked anyone to go. The risks are significant." Elena accepted the envelope without opening it, understanding that some knowledge was better acquired when there was no opportunity to reconsider. "Admiral, how deep are we talking about?" "Deep enough that Elena Rodriguez might not exist when you return. Deep enough that Black Widow herself might need to disappear permanently to protect the mission's security." Elena looked around the Pentagon's secure briefing room one final time, memorizing details that she might never see again. The marble corridors, the classified briefing areas, the offices where dedicated professionals worked to protect American interests around the clock. It was possible she would never return to this world of official recognition and institutional support. As Elena walked toward the secure exit that would take her to Andrews Air Force Base, and whatever awaited in Moscow, she paused to deliver one final message to Captain Torres, who had remained behind to complete the administrative requirements of Admiral Stone's arrest. "Captain," she said, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom, "remember what you learned today. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who wear our uniform and speak our language, but also remember that the most dedicated protectors are often the ones nobody notices, the people who stand in the shadows so others can live in the light." Elena Rodriguez, Black Widow, walked into the Washington night toward her next mission, carrying with her the satisfaction of justice served and the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, other silent guardians were taking up their posts to protect a nation that would never know their names. The Pentagon's lights continued to burn through the night, as they had every night for decades, powered by the dedication of those who served in recognition and those who served in shadow, each playing their part in the eternal vigilance that freedom required. And in the silence between footsteps, in the space between official acknowledgement and classified necessity, the real work of protecting America continued, conducted by people like Elena Rodriguez, whose greatest victories would never be celebrated, whose most important sacrifices would never be known, and whose deepest commitment was measured not in glory received, but in threats prevented and lives protected. The war room had gone silent when she revealed her call sign, but the truest silence was the one she carried into whatever came next, the silence of service without recognition, of sacrifice without fanfare, of duty that asked for everything and promised nothing except the knowledge that somewhere in the world, people slept safely because someone like Black Widow stood watch in the darkness.
The stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.